You've heard of personality types, archetypes, signs, personas, which has made a video with some of them. But is there any substance behind them, or are they total and utter bullships? Are they a useful way of looking at the world, or are they just a steaming pile of craps? There's only one way to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, let's play Is It Shit? The point of thinking about personalities is to better understand ourselves and others, and maybe how we relate to each other. So, for a personality framework to be useful, it needs to be representative of reality and usable. So, we're going to look at some personality frameworks and see how well they meet these two criteria. Those that are representative of reality but not practical for real-world use will be labeled prickles. Those that are easy and fun to use but don't represent reality will be labeled goo. And if we find anything that meets both criteria, we'll call that prickly goo. And if you're wondering where the whole prickles and goo thing comes from, I recommend checking out our video on that topic. Let's start with trait-based models. So, the best known trait-based model is called the 5-factor model of personality, and it's based on 5 traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and the Ross's. The psychologist got these by interviewing an absolute cramble of people to get their traits, and then clustering them into these 5. It's scientific as funk, and there are loads of papers about it. And it could introduce you to some traits which you might not have heard of or had thought about before. So it's kind of useful, but not really. It definitely takes the representative of reality box, because it's really just grouping traits that clearly exist into 5 big traits, and then ranking people from their level of each one. But if I tell you I'm O equals 59, C equals 32, E 73, A 45, and N 62, what are you going to be able to do with this information? Not much. So it's not ticking the usability box. These shapes do look kind of fun, but they're not going to make it easy to form the image of a person. Imagine you ask someone for directions, and they give you a technically correct, but incredibly detailed and complex set of instructions that describe every step of the 10-minute walk. They may be accurate, but are ultimately useless. So we're labeling this model prickly. Now, on the other hand, there's no use in somebody giving you a clear, simple set of instructions that leads to the wrong place. Which brings us to our next set of models. Mystical models. These are a lot of fun, and taken as a group, probably the most popular way of thinking about personality across the world. The main one, of course, is horoscopes or star signs. Look, it's pretty obvious that they're engaging and usable, because they're everywhere. And, they might cause you to reflect on something real in your personality, and you see something you identify with in your star sign. So I'm not going to say they have zero value. But when it comes to looking for evidence behind the way star signs are assigned to people, of course, it's total horse shingles. We're labeling these as good. Archetypal models. Archetypal models are about using symbols and themes to help people understand their behaviors and motivations. Jung, who invented the idea of archetypes, used them as a way of explaining the subconscious, with archetypes including the hero, the shadow, and the mother. You may have heard of a book which later became popular, building on Jung's ideas, with 4 masculine archetypes: king, warrior, magician, lover. Coming from a 20th century psychologist, these archetypes might sound a bit more legit, but in the end, there's no more evidence for dividing men into these 4 archetypes than there is for 12 star signs. However, unlike some of the mystical models, these archetypal models don't claim to be a science. So if you use them as an art, they definitely have some value. In any case, we're labeling these as goo. Okay, so now that we've unnecessarily dragged you to the 2 extremes of the personality model spectrum, we might have worn you down enough that we can just present personality types as the perfect combination of facts and flair, and you'll accept it. Because with attention spans being what they are, who's even got the energy to argue this far into a video, right? Wrong. Okay, actually right, but only partially. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, is probably the most famous one, splitting personalities into 16 types based on 4 dimensions: introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, thinking of feeling, judging, or perceiving. It's widely used and pretty easy to get, making it a go-to tool for personal development and team building. There are other typology models, of course, but in general, they all tend to have similar pros and cons. Critics say that the MBTI and other typology models can give inconsistent results, meaning you may get different outcomes if you take the test more than once. Plus, these models can oversimplify things by putting people into boxes that might not capture all their unique traits and behaviors. And they don't have a ton of scientific proof behind them. In the case of the MBTI, there was at least something of a research process involved in its creation, and its traits kind of line up with the 5-factor model personality traits, which do have a lot of research behind them. So, the MBTI is almost prickly goo, but on the gooey side. Speaking of the 5-factor model, what about taking the 5 traits that have been well researched and splitting them into high and low categories, then making personality types out of them? Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Well, the problem is that, from all the evidence, these traits aren't easily splittable because they have what's called normal distribution, meaning that most of us are actually in the middle. What we can perhaps split out more easily are behaviors and temporary states. Yeah, many of us are ambiverts, but it's not that difficult to identify who is behaving like an extrovert or an introvert in a given situation. So there may be real value in temporary, state-based archetypes. If only someone had made a video on something like that. Then again, if all these systems are basically flawed, why use any of them? Can't we just treat everybody as individuals? Well, that reminds me of a conversation I once overheard, something like this. I never got excited about the idea of going to Australia. I just don't think I like it. How can you say that if you've never even been there? I think you can see the problem in this line of thinking. Look, no system of categorizing people is perfect, because like countries, we're all complex and different. But just like you can't fly to every country in the world for a quick preview before you book your next trip, sometimes you have to make quick judgments about new people you meet. And without realizing it, we often make these judgments on the basis of superficial and misleading things. It's an unavoidable fact that sometimes in life, we need to make quick decisions about people before we have the chance to fully get to know them. So why not use a framework with at least some evidence behind it as a tool to help us do that? Personality types? Not shit. Thanks for watching. See you soon.